It was meant to be nothing more than a harmless, drunken dare a single kiss in a crowded bar to prove she wasn't the boring, uptight resident doctor everyone assumed she was. But in Chicago, arrogance is what gets you buried, not curiosity. When Sienna Cole approached the man shrouded in the corner's darkness, she had no idea she was walking toward Dante Moretti, or that he was currently deciding who lived and who died that night. By pressing her lips to his, she unknowingly signed a contract with the devil himself. This is the story of how Sienna Cole accidentally became the first lady of the underworld. The air inside the gilded cage smelled of expensive cologne, old money, and bad decisions. It was the kind of place tucked away in Chicago's River North district where the lighting was always dim, the jazz was live, and the cocktails cost more than a weekly grocery budget. Sienna shouldn't have been there. She should have been in her studio apartment, studying for her board exams or sleeping off the 36-hour shift she'd just finished at Northwestern Memorial. But Chloe, her best friend and the devil on her shoulder, had insisted. It was her 27th birthday, and according to Chloe, Sienna was wasting her prime years buried in medical charts. "Sienna, you're zoning out again," Chloe said, snapping her fingers in front of her face. She took a sip of her Cosmopolitan, her eyes dancing with mischief. "Look, the night is young, we look hot, and you need to do something reckless. Just once." Sienna adjusted the strap of her black dress. It was tighter than anything she usually wore, a borrowed piece from Chloe's closet that made her feel exposed. "I do reckless things," she countered, swirling the ice in her gin and tonic. "I ate a gas station sushi roll last week." Chloe rolled her eyes so hard, Sienna thought they'd get stuck. "Pathetic. Truly tragic. No, I mean something real, something that makes your heart race." She scanned the room, her gaze landing on the VIP Section A raised platform cordoned off by velvet ropes and massive security guards who looked like they were carved out of granite. "I dare you," she whispered, a wicked grin spreading across her face. "No," Sienna said immediately. "I don't even know what it is yet, but no." "See the guy in the corner booth, the one alone?" Sienna followed her gaze. The VIP section was crowded with laughing socialites and tech moguls, except for the far corner that sat a man who seemed to suck the oxygen out of the room. He was wearing a charcoal suit that fit him with the precision of armor. He wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't looking at the women trying to catch his eye. He was staring at the amber liquid in his glass with an intensity that was almost terrifying. He was handsome, in a brutal, sharp-edged way. Dark hair, a jawline that could cut glass, and an aura of stillness that felt predatory. "He looks like he's waiting for a funeral," Sienna muttered. "Or maybe he just caused one." "He's the most serious man in the bar," Chloe noted. "Probably a hedge fund guy whose stocks just tanked. Here's the dare, walk up to him, kiss him on the lips and walk away, no explanation." "Are you insane?" Sienna hissed. "He looks like he bites." "It's a birthday dare, Sienna. You can't refuse a birthday dare. It's written in the Geneva Convention." Chloe leaned in. "Do it, and I'll cover your tab for the next 3 months. Don't do it, and you have to cover my shift at the clinic on New Year's Eve." The New Year's Eve shift at the ER was hell on earth. Drunks, fireworks accidents, and frostbite. It was a fate worse than death. Sienna looked back at the man. He hadn't moved. There was something magnetic about his isolation. He looked lonely, or maybe just bored. The gin buzzed in her head, giving her a surge of liquid courage she didn't possess sober. 3 months of tabs, Sienna clarified. "Top shelf only," Chloe promised. Sienna took a deep breath, finished her drink in one gulp, and stood up. "Fine, but if I get arrested for harassment, you're bailing me out." Her legs felt unsteady as she navigated through the crowd. The closer she got to the VIP section, the heavier the air felt. The noise of the jazz band seemed to fade, replaced by the thudding of her own heart. The security guard at the rope stepped forward, his hand raising to stop her. "Private event, miss." Sienna didn't know what came over her. Maybe it was the exhaustion, maybe the gin. She looked him in the eye and lied with a straight face. "He's expecting me. I'm the grief counselor." The guard looked back at the man in the corner, then back at her. He looked confused enough to hesitate. Sienna slipped past him before he could process the absurdity of her claim. She walked up to the booth. The man didn't look up. He was tracing the rim of his glass with a long finger. Up close, he was even more intimidating. There was a scar running through his left eyebrow, interrupting the perfection of his face. "Excuse me," Sienna said, her voice trembling slightly. He stopped tracing the glass. He slowly lifted his head. His eyes were the color of cold brew coffee, dark, almost black, and completely devoid of warmth. When he looked at her, she felt like a prey animal caught in a spotlight. "You're lost," he said. His voice was a low baritone, rough like gravel. It wasn't a question. "No," Sienna said. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "I'm not." Before she could talk herself out of it, she leaned down. She saw his eyes widen, just a fraction of crack in the stone facade. She grabbed the lapels of his expensive jacket, pulled him forward, and pressed her lips to his. She expected him to push her away. She expected him to yell. Instead, he froze. For a second, his lips were cold, unyielding. But then, as the shock registered, she felt a hand grasp her hip. It wasn't gentle. It was possessive. A jolt of electricity, hot and sharp, shot down her spine. It wasn't a soft kiss. It was a collision. He tasted of whiskey and danger. Sienna pulled away abruptly, breathless, her face burning. "Happy birthday to me," she whispered, the adrenaline making her dizzy. She turned on her heel to run, to flee back to Chloe and safety. She made it exactly 2 steps before she heard the distinctive, metallic click of a safety being disengaged. "Sit down," the man said. It wasn't a request. The music in the club was still playing, a saxophone wailing somewhere in the distance, but in that corner booth, the world had gone silent. Sienna froze. She slowly turned around. The man, the one she now knew had reflexes faster than a viper, hadn't stood up. He was still sitting, looking at her with a terrifying calmness. But now, 2 other men had materialized from the shadows of the booth next to them. They were massive, wearing ill-fitting suits that struggled to contain their bulk. One of them had his hand inside his jacket. The man in the charcoal suit, the one she had just kissed, raised a hand, a subtle gesture that stopped the giants in their tracks. "I said, sit down," he repeated. His voice was low, barely over a whisper, but it carried a weight of authority that brooked no argument. Sienna's medical training kicked in. Assess the situation. Pulse elevated. Threat level critical. Flight response blocked. She sat. She slid into the booth opposite him, her hands trembling in her lap. Chloe was across the room, probably cheering, completely unaware that Sienna was currently staring down a loaded situation. "Who sent you?" he asked. He picked up his drink again. But he didn't drink. He watched her over the rim. "What?" Sienna squeaked. "Nobody. My friend." It was a dare. He tilted his head. "A dare." He said the word like it was a foreign language. "You walked past 2 armed guards, approached Dante Moretti, and put your mouth on him. For a dare." Dante Moretti. The name hit her like a bucket of ice water. She wasn't a criminal, but she lived in Chicago. Everyone knew the name Moretti. They were the ghosts in the machine of the city's underworld. They owned the unions, the docks, and half the politicians, and she had just sexually harassed the heir to the throne. I didn't know who you were," she stammered, the blood draining from her face. "I swear. I'm just a doctor. I'm a resident at Northwestern. My friend Chloe, she's over there in the red dress. She dared me because I'm boring. I thought you were just a sad businessman." One of the bodyguards stepped forward. "Boss, she could have had a poisoned lipstick. A needle. We should take her to the back and check her." Dante raised his hand again, silencing the guard. He leaned forward, the dim light casting shadows across his sharp cheekbones. He studied her face, dissecting her with his eyes. He looked at her cheap watch, her worn-out fingernails, scrubbed raw from surgery prep, the genuine terror in her eyes. A sad businessman, he murmured. A corner of his mouth twitched. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was close. And what does a sad businessman taste like, Doctor? Coal, she whispered. Sienna coal, she whispered. Sienna coal. Doctor, he sat back. You have terrible survival instincts. I'm realizing that, she said. Look, Mr. Moretti, I am so incredibly sorry. I will leave. I will never speak of this. I will move to Wisconsin. Just please don't kill me. Dante stared at her for a long, agonizing minute. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Then he reached into his jacket. She flinched, expecting a gun. He pulled out a silver lighter and lit a thin cigarillo. If you were an assassin, I'd be dead, he said, exhaling a plume of blue smoke. And you're shaking too much to be a wire-wearing Fed. You're just an idiot. An idiot, Sienna agreed rapidly. A complete moron. Finish your drink, he commanded. I don't have one. He signaled the waitress with a flick of his finger. She appeared instantly, looking terrified. Macallan, neat. For the lady. I don't drink scotch, Sienna said automatically. You do tonight. The drinker scotch, Sienna said automatically. You do tonight. The drink arrived. She drank it. It burned going down, but it settled her nerves. Go back to your friend, Sienna, Dante said, his voice dropping an octave. Leave this bar. Go home. And if you value that medical degree, you will forget my face, you will forget my name, and you will never, ever do something this stupid again. Done, she said, sliding out of the booth. Thank you. Goodbye. She walked away as fast as she could without running. She grabbed Chloe by the arm, nearly dragging her off her bar stool. Ow! What happened? Was it magical? Chloe, what happened? Was it magical? Chloe asked, stumbling after her. We are leaving. Now, Sienna hissed as they pushed through the exit doors into the cold Chicago night. Sienna glanced back one last time. Dante Moretti was watching her. He wasn't drinking. He wasn't looking at the phone. He was watching her leave, his eyes tracking her like a predator, watching a deer slip into the woods, and sitting directly behind him, in a booth she hadn't noticed before, was a man with pale blonde hair and a jagged scar running down his neck. He wasn't looking at Dante. He was looking at her, and unlike Dante, who looked intrigued, this man looked like he was memorizing her face for a police sketch. Or a hit list. Sienna shivered, pulling her coat tighter. Did you get his number? Chloe asked as they hailed a cab. No, Sienna said, her voice shaking. I think I just got a second chance at life. She thought that was the end of it. She thought she could go back to the sterility of the hospital, the endless rounds, the cafeteria coffee. She was wrong. 2 weeks passed. Sienna had almost convinced herself the incident at the Gilded Cage was a hallucination induced by sleep deprivation and gin. She threw herself into her work. She was on the trauma rotation, which meant 12-hour shifts of stitching up stab wounds, setting broken bones, and trying to convince drunk college kids not to drive home. It was a rainy Tuesday night classic Chicago weather when the page came in. Level 1. Trauma. Gunshot wound. Private arrival. Private arrival usually meant a gang drop-off. They didn't call ambulances. They just dumped the body at the ER bay and sped off. Sienna rushed to the trauma bay, snapping on latex gloves. Satis, she barked at the nurse. Greg, male, mid-30s. GSW to the abdomen, hypertensive. He's barely conscious, but he's fighting the restraints, Greg said, looking flustered. And Sienna, there are men with him. They won't let security in. Her stomach dropped. What do you mean? She pushed through the curtains into Trauma Bay 4. The room was small, bright, and smelled of copper and antiseptic. On the gurney lay a man groaning in pain, clutching a towel soaked in dark blood to his side. Standing over him were 2 men in suits, the same ill-fitting suits she had seen at the club. Sienna's breath hitched. The man on the table wasn't Dante. It was a younger man, maybe 25. He had curly hair and a face that would have been angelic if it wasn't contorted in agony. One of the suit-wearing giants looked at her. "Fix him." "No, police. I have to report all gunshot wounds to the PD," she said, her voice automatic, though her knees were shaking. "It's the law." The giant stepped forward, blocking the door. "No police? Or we start breaking things. Starting with your hands. Lorenzo, stand down." A voice came from the corner of the room. Sienna hadn't seen him. He was standing in the shadows away from the harsh fluorescent lights. He stepped forward. He was wearing a black trench coat, dripping with rain. His face was pale, tight with worry, but his eyes were the same cold, dark coffee color she had seen 2 weeks ago. Dante Moretti. He looked at the patient, then he looked at Sienna. Recognition flashed in his eyes, followed immediately by annoyance. "You," he said flatly. "You," she whispered. "You know this doctor, boss?" The giant Lorenzo asked, his hand hovering near his waist. "She's the grief counselor," Dante said, a dry, humorless edge to his voice. He looked at her, his gaze intense. "My brother, Leo, he was in an accident." "That is a bullet hole, Mr. Moretti," Sienna said, surprised by her own boldness. "Not an accident." "Fix him," Dante said. He stepped closer, invading her personal space. She could smell the rain on him and the metallic tang of blood. He lowered his voice so only she could hear. "You owe me, Sienna. I let you walk away from the club. Now, you save his life, and we are even." "I can't operate here," she hissed back. "He needs an OR. He needs a surgeon. I'm a resident." "You're a doctor. Do it here. Stabilize him. We have a private facility we can move him to. But he won't survive the transport unless you stop the bleeding." She looked at the boy on the table. Leo. He was pale, his lips turning blue. If she waited for security or the police, he would bleed out. Sienna made a choice, the wrong choice for her career, but the only choice for a doctor. "Greg," she yelled to the nurse, who was cowering by the monitors, "get me a thoracotomy tray, 4 units of Oneg, and get out. I don't want you involved in this. Sienna, go!" She turned back to Dante. "Get your goons out of my light. And you hold the retractor." Dante blinked, surprised. "Me? Unless you want your brother to die. Put on a pair of gloves." For the next 20 minutes, the world narrowed down to the wound. It was messy. A small caliber bullet had nicked the liver. There was blood everywhere. Sienna worked fast, her hands steady despite the chaos in her mind. Dante stood opposite her, holding the retractor, obeying her commands without question. Suction. Clamp. Sponge. He didn't flinch at the blood. He watched her hands with a focused intensity, like he was memorizing her technique. "Got it," she breathed, clamping the bleeder. "He's stable. You can move him." She stepped back, peeling off the blood-soaked gloves. Her adrenaline crashed, and she felt lightheaded. Dante looked at his brother, whose vitals were stabilizing on the monitor. He reached out and brushed a curl of hair off Leo's forehead with a tenderness that shocked her. Then he turned to Sienna. He took a step forward. She backed up until she hit the counter. He placed a hand on the wall beside her head, boxing her in. "You're good," he said softly. "I'm a doctor," she replied, trying to keep her voice from shaking. "Now please, leave before the police get here." "I can't do that," Dante said. "Why not? We're even." "You said we're even." That was before you saw my brother shot, before you saw Lorenzo, before you became an accessory to a crime." He looked down at her, and for the first time, she saw something other than coldness in his eyes. Regret. "Lorenzo," Dante called out, walking away from her. "Yeah, boss, bring the car around. The doctor is coming with us." "What?" Sienna gasped. No, I have a shift. I have a life. You had a life, Dante corrected. He took her arm, gentle but firm. Now you have a target on your back. The people who did this to Leo, they'll be looking for anyone who helped him. I'm not kidnapping you, Sienna. I'm taking you into protective custody. That sounds exactly like kidnapping, she yelled. Call it what you want, Dante said, pulling her toward the back exit into the rainy night. But if you stay here, you're dead by morning. As he shoved her into the back of a black SUV, Sienna realized her friend Chloe was right about one thing. Her life wasn't boring anymore. The safe house was a misnomer. It wasn't a house. It was a fortress in the sky. Dante lived in a penthouse occupying the top 2 floors of a limestone pre-war building on Lake Shore Drive. The elevator opened directly into a foyer that cost more than Sienna's medical school tuition. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Lake Michigan, churning black and angry under the storm. But she couldn't appreciate the view. She was too busy looking at the men with assault rifles standing by the balcony doors. Welcome home, Dante said, his voice devoid of irony. He tossed his wet coat to a waiting staff member, an older woman named Maria, who looked at him with maternal worry rather than fear. Is this a prison? Sienna asked, hugging her arms around her chest. Her scrubs were stained with Leo's blood. She felt gross were stained with Leo's blood. She felt gross, tired, and terrified. It's the most secure location in Chicago, Dante corrected. Maria will show you to the guest wing. You have everything you need. Clothes, food, toiletries. I need my phone, Sienna demanded. I need to call the hospital. If I don't show up for my shift tomorrow, they'll call the police. Dante stopped halfway to his office. He turned slowly. Your shift has been covered. Your residency director received an email stating you had a family emergency and... Where are you from? Ohio, she said automatically. In Ohio, you've been granted a 2-week leave of absence. Her jaw dropped. How? How could you possibly? I sit on the board of the hospital, Sienna. My family built the oncology wing. Administrative adjustments are easy. He looked exhausted, the adrenaline of the night fading to reveal deep lines of stress around his eyes. Go shower. Check on Leo in an hour, then try to sleep. He disappeared into his office, and the heavy oak doors clicked shut. For the next 3 days, Sienna existed in a strange limbo. The penthouse was silent, suffocatingly luxurious. She was a prisoner, but her cell had heated marble floors and 1,000 thread-count sheets. Her primary focus was Leo. He was set up in a guest room that had been converted into a makeshift ICU. He was young, reckless, and surprisingly chatty for someone who had taken a bullet to the liver. You have gentle hands, Doc, Leo rasped on the second day as she changed his dressing. Dante usually just pours vodka on my cuts and tells me to man up. Dante sounds like a terrible doctor, she muttered, taping the gauze. Why did you get shot, Leo? Leo's grin faltered. He looked toward the door to ensure they were alone. Disagreement. Territory dispute. There's a new player in town. Someone who doesn't respect the old ways. The blonde man, Sienna said suddenly. From the bar. Leo's eyes sharpened. You saw him. The night of the dare. He was sitting behind Dante. Watching him. Leo swore under his breath in Italian. Declan O'Malley, the Irishman. He's supposed to be in Boston. If he's here... Leo tried to sit up, groaning as his stitches pulled. I need to tell Dante. You need to lie down, Sienna ordered, pushing him back. Dante knows. He has to know. Dante carries the weight of the world, Sienna. Sometimes he misses the knife coming for his own back because he's too busy watching everyone else's. That night, Sienna couldn't sleep. The silence of the apartment was heavy. She wandered out into the massive living room, the moonlight casting long shadows across the Persian rugs. She found Dante on the balcony. He was standing out in the cold wind, wearing just a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, staring out at the city lights. He held a tumbler of amber liquid, but he wasn't drinking it. She slid open the glass door. The wind whipped her hair across her face. "You'll catch pneumonia," she said. He didn't turn around. Doctors, always diagnosing. Sienna walked up beside him. The city below looked peaceful from this height. It was hard to believe that down there people were killing each other over invisible lines on a map. "Leo is healing well," she said. "No sign of infection." "Thank you," he said. It was the first time he had sounded genuine. "He's the only family I have left. My father. He was a brutal man. He taught us that love was a weakness." "Leo is the only weakness I allow myself." "And what about you?" she asked. "Who takes care of you when you bleed?" Dante turned to look at her. The moonlight made the scar on his eyebrow stand out. His eyes were dark, bottomless pits. "I don't bleed, Sienna. I can't afford to." "Everyone bleeds, Dante. I can't afford to." "Everyone bleeds, Dante." He turned fully toward her, setting his glass on the railing. The air between them shifted, charged with a sudden electric tension. He reached out, his hand hovering near her face before his knuckles grazed her cheekbone. His skin was cold from the wind. Hers was burning. "Why did you do it?" he asked softly. "That night at the bar. Why me?" "I told you it was a dare. There were 50 men in that room. Why did you choose the one man who could destroy you?" Sienna looked up at him, her breath hitching. "Maybe because you looked like the only one who needed to be kissed." Dante's eyes dropped to her lips. For a terrifying, heart-stopping moment, she thought he was going to finish what she had started in the bar. His hand moved to the nape of her neck, his thumb tracing the pulse that was hammering there. "You are dangerous, Sienna Cole," he whispered. "More dangerous than the Irishman. More dangerous than a bullet. Why? Because you make me want to forget the rules." He leaned in. She closed her eyes, tilting her head back. Then his phone buzzed. A harsh, vibrating sound against the metal railing. The spell shattered. Dante pulled back instantly, the mask of the dawn slamming back into place. He checked the screen, his jaw tightening. "Go to bed, Sienna," he said, his voice cold again. "Lock your door." He walked back inside, leaving her alone in the cold, with the taste of the almost kiss on her lips. The next morning, the atmosphere in the penthouse had shifted from tense to suffocating. Lorenzo and the other guards were pacing. Weapons were being cleaned on the dining room table. The blinds were drawn tight. Dante was in his office with the door closed, shouting in Italian. Sienna caught words like traditore, traitor, and sangue, blood. She went to check on Leo. He was sitting up, eating a sandwich, but he looked pale. "What's happening?" she asked. "One of our shipments was hit last night," Leo said, his voice grim. "At the docks. 3 men dead." "But that's not the worst part." "What is?" "They knew the route. We only finalized the route 2 hours before the truck left. It was offline. No phones, no emails. Verbal only." Sienna's blood ran cold. "That means—" "Someone in this room," Leo said, gesturing to the penthouse walls, "is a rat." Sienna spent the afternoon trying to stay invisible. She sat in the library, pretending to read a medical journal, but her ears were straining. She watched the men coming and going. There was Lorenzo, the giant bodyguard. Loyal, simple. There was Matteo, the driver. Quiet, observant. And there was Cillian. Cillian was Dante's right-hand man. He was sharp, dressed in impeccably tailored suits, with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He had been nothing but polite to Sienna, bringing her coffee and asking if she needed anything from the outside world. Around 4 p.m., Dante called a meeting in the living room. He stood by the fireplace, radiating a dark, suppressed rage. "We have a leak," Dante announced. His voice was calm, which made it terrifying. The Irishman knew the route. He knew the time. He knew the cargo. He walked down the line of men. Lorenzo, Matteo. He walked down the line of men. Lorenzo, Matteo, Cillian, and 2 others. I am locking this place down, Dante said. No one leaves. No signals go out. If I find a phone that isn't authorized, I will shoot the owner myself. Cillian stepped forward. Boss, maybe we should move, Leo. If they know about the shipment, they might know about this safe house. This house is unlisted, Dante snapped. It's under a shell company owned by a ghost. It's the safest place in the city. Of course. Cillian nodded, just being cautious. Sienna was watching Cillian. There was something off. He wasn't sweating. There was something... Theo raised something. Everyone else was nervous, shifting their weight. Cillian was perfectly still. Later that evening, Sienna went to the kitchen to get water. The penthouse was dark. As she passed the study, she heard a low voice. She froze. The door was cracked open an inch. She peeked inside. It was Cillian. He was standing by the window, his back to the door. He was holding a device, not a phone, but something smaller, a burner, a transmitter. Midnight, Cillian whispered. Yes, the girl is here too. 2 birds. Sienna's heart stopped. The girl. Hair. He paused, listening to the other end. Don't worry about the alarms. I disabled the perimeter sensors on the south balcony 15 minutes ago. Just come in quiet. Moretti trusts me. He's distracted by the doctor. She covered her mouth to stifle a gasp. Cillian was the rat. He was letting them in. Tonight, she backed away slowly, her socks sliding silently on the marble. Once she was around the corner she ran. She burst into Dante's bedroom without knocking. He was awake, sitting on the edge of his bed, reviewing a map. He looked up, his hand instantly going to the gun on his nightstand. Sienna. It's Cillian, she gasped, locking the door behind her. He's the rat. I heard him. Dante stood up slowly. Sienna, Cillian has been with me since we were kids. His father saved my father's life. I heard him, Dante. He's on a burner. He's on a burner. He's on a burner, he said midnight. He said he disabled the south balcony sensors. He said, the girl is here too. He's letting them in to kill us. Dante stared at her. He looked for a lie in her eyes, hysteria, anything. But he saw only the truth. He looked at the grandfather clock in the corner. 11:58 p.m. Stay here, Dante commanded. He grabbed his gun and a second magazine. Lock the door. Do not open it unless you hear my voice. Dante, do as I say. He moved to the door, but before he could open it, the sound of shattered glass echoed through the penthouse. Crash, then the sickening thwop-thwop of silenced automatic weapons. They're early, Dante growled. He didn't leave her. Instead, he grabbed her wrist and dragged her toward the ensuite bathroom. Into the tub. Keep your head down. I'm not hiding in a bathtub while you get killed, Sienna yelled, grabbing a heavy marble statue from the shelf. I know anatomy. I know where to hit to hurt. Dante looked at her, a flicker of admiration crossing his face amidst the chaos. Fine. Stay behind me. If you see Cillian, don't hesitate. They moved into the hallway. It was a war zone. 2 men in black tactical gear were coming up the stairs. Dante dropped them with 2 shots to the chest, precise and lethal. Leo! Sienna screamed. Lorenzo is with him, Dante shouted over the gunfire. They pushed toward the living room. The south balcony doors, the ones Cillian had mentioned, were shattered. Men were pouring in. And there, standing amidst the chaos, calmly watching his employer's home be invaded, was Cillian. He held a gun, but he wasn't firing at the invaders. He was pointing it at the hallway, pointing it at them. I'm sorry, Dante, Cillian called out, his voice smooth, but O'Malley pays better. And he offers retirement. You? You only offer an early grave. Dante pulled Sienna behind a marble pillar, just as Sienna behind a marble pillar, just as Sienna behind a marble. Bullets chipped away at the stone inches from her face. Dust and debris filled the air. "He's suppressing us," Dante said through gritted teeth. "I can't get a clean shot." "He's reloading," Sienna said, counting the shots. 1, 2, 3, 15. Now. Dante spun out from behind the pillar. He didn't aim for the chest. He aimed for the shoulder, the knee. He was surgical. Cillian screamed as his leg gave out, sending him crashing to the floor. But the invaders were closing in. There were too many of them. "We have to get to the panic room," Dante said. "It's in the library. We can't leave Leo. Go to the library, Sienna. I'll get Leo." "No!" She grabbed his arm. "Together. We go together." Dante looked at her, really looked at her. In the middle of a gunfight, with death marching up the stairs, he grabbed the back of her neck and kissed her. It was hard, desperate, and terrified. It tasted of gunpowder and finality. "If we die tonight," he said against her lips, "I want you to know that you were the only thing in my life that felt real." He pulled away, his eyes blazing. "Now run." They sprinted toward the guest wing. Lorenzo was dragging a limping Leo into the hallway. Lorenzo was bleeding from his head, but he was still firing a massive shotgun with one hand. "Boss, too many of them!" Lorenzo roared. "To the library," Dante ordered. They formed a phalanx, Dante and Lorenzo firing, Sienna supporting Leo. They moved backward, step by step, as bullets tore up the walls around them. They made it to the library. Dante shoved a bookshelf aside, revealing a steel door. He punched in a code. The door hissed open. He shoved Leo and Lorenzo inside. He grabbed Sienna. "Get in." "Dante, come on. I have to seal the magnetic lock from the outside panel or they can override it," he lied. She could see it in his eyes. "No! You are not sacrificing yourself." Sienna didn't let go of his hand. She pulled him with all the hysterical strength she had. He pulled him with all the hysterical strength she had. "Get in." He hesitated. A bullet whizzed past his ear, shattering a vase. He looked at the enemy closing in, then at her. He chose her. He dove into the panic room. Sienna slammed the internal button. The heavy steel door slid shut with a resounding clang, sealing them in just as the hail of bullets hammered against the metal. Silence. Heavy, panting silence. They were safe, but they were trapped, and in the dim red emergency light of the panic room, Sienna saw the blood soaking through Dante's white shirt. "Dante," she whispered, her hands reaching out. He slid down the wall, leaving a dark smear of red behind him. "Just a scratch," he wheezed, clutching his side. She tore his shirt open. It wasn't a scratch. It was a gut shot. "Oh God," she sobbed, her doctor mode warring with a panic. Okay, I need pressure. Leo, give me your shirt." Dante grabbed her hand. His grip was weak. "Sienna," he whispered, "don't let me die." I haven't taken you on a real date yet." "You are not dying," she commanded, tears streaming down her face. "That is an order, Mr. Moretti. You don't get to kiss me like that and then die." She pressed her hands into the wound. The blood was hot. Outside, the enemy was drilling at the door. Inside, the man she had accidentally fallen in love with was bleeding out in her arms. And the only thing she had to save him was a first aid kit and a prayer. The panic room was a cold steel box, illuminated only by the crimson glow of the emergency lights. The air recycled with a low mechanical hum, but it couldn't mask the smell of Iron Dante's blood. He was losing consciousness. His skin, usually an olive tone, was now gray. The bullet had entered the lower left quadrant of his abdomen. "Lorenzo," Sienna barked, her voice echoing in the small space. "I need the medkit. Now. Leo, put pressure on this wound. Do not let up, even if he screams." Lorenzo, the giant of a man, looked terrified. He handed her the orange trauma case mounted on the wall. She ripped it open. It was well-stocked, a testament to Dante's dangerous life. But it wasn't an operating room. "Dante," she said, slapping his cheek lightly. "Stay with me." His eyes fluttered open, hazy and unfocused. "Sienna, leave me." "The ventilation shaft. Behind the rack. You can fit. Go." "Burl, shut up," she said, tearing open a packet of clotting gauze. "I am not crawling into a vent like a hamster. I am fixing you." The sound of the drill outside the heavy steel door changed pitch. It was grinding against the locking mechanism. Z, 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 Z. 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 Z. ZZDC. They had maybe 10 minutes before they breached. "I have no anesthesia," she told him, gripping his hand. "This is going to hurt more than anything you've ever felt." Dante gritted his teeth, a sheen of sweat covering his face. "Do it." Sienna poured antiseptic directly into the wound. Dante's back arched off the floor, a guttural roar tearing from his throat. Leo looked away, tears in his eyes, but he kept his hands pressing down. She worked with frantic precision. She had to clamp the vessel, pack the wound, and stitch it closed enough to stop the exsanguination. Her hands were slick with blood. The drilling grew louder, vibrating the floorboards beneath them. "Lorenzo," she said without looking up. "What happens when that door opens?" "I have 6 rounds left in the shotgun," Lorenzo said grimly. "I take 3 with me. Maybe 4. Not enough," she muttered. She tied off the final suture. It was ugly, but it would hold. "Okay, he's stable, for now." She looked at the shelf of supplies, flares, MREs, water, and an oxygen tank. A small, portable cylinder for medical emergencies. A crazy, desperate idea formed in her mind. "Lorenzo," she asked, "does Cillian know about the ventilation shaft?" "No," Dante rasped. He was awake, his eyes clear despite the pain. "Only family knows." "Good." She grabbed the oxygen tank and the road flares. "Here is the plan. Lorenzo, you are going to open the vent. You and Leo are going to drag Dante into it. It leads to the basement, right?" "Yes," Leo nodded. "To the boiler room. Go. Now. What about you?" "Doe, what about you?" Dante demanded, trying to sit up and failing. "I'm going to buy us some time," she said, looking at the door. The drill bit pierced through the steel plating with a spark of hot metal. They were through. "Sienna, no!" Dante shouted. "Lorenzo, take him," she screamed. "If you want him to live, get him out." Lorenzo looked at her with newfound respect. He hoisted Dante up, Dante struggling weakly, cursing her in Italian, and shoved him into the narrow ventilation shaft. Leo followed. "Good luck, Doc," Lorenzo whispered, and closed the grate behind him. Sienna was alone. She took the oxygen tank and cracked the valve open. The hiss of escaping gas filled the room. Pure oxygen. Highly flammable. She placed it directly in front of the door. Then she retreated to the far corner of the room, behind the heavy steel gun safe, and lit a road flare. The red light washed over the room. The drill stopped. A heavy thud, then the hydraulic hiss of the door being forced open. "Come out, Dante," Cillian's voice echoed. "It's over." The heavy door swung outward. Cillian stepped in, flanked by 2 of the Irishman's thugs. He looked around the empty room, confused. He saw the vent grate, and then he saw Sienna. She was huddled behind the safe, wearing a blood-soaked dress, holding a burning red flare. "Where is he?" Cillian sneered, raising his gun. "Did he leave his girlfriend behind to die?" "He didn't leave me," Sienna said, her voice shaking but loud. "I stayed to welcome you." She threw the flare. It didn't hit Cillian. It hit the stream of pure oxygen venting from the tank right at his feet. Froom! The explosion wasn't a bomb-like detonation, but a massive, instantaneous fireball that consumed the oxygen-rich air in the entryway. The blast wave knocked Sienna backward, slamming her head against the wall. Cillian and the two men didn't even have time to scream. They were engulfed in a flash of white-hot heat. Sienna blacked out. She woke up to the feeling of cold rain on her face. She was moving. No, she was being carried. She groaned, opening her eyes. The world was spinning. She was in the arms of a man in a tactical vest. "She's awake," a voice shouted. Sienna blinked. It wasn't Lorenzo. It was a police officer. No, he was wearing military fatigues with no insignia. "Dante," she croaked. "He's in the ambulance," the man said. "He refused to leave until we found you. We found you in the rubble. The blast shielded you, but you have a concussion." They loaded her into the back of a black Mercedes Sprinter van that had been converted into an ambulance. Dante was there, lying on a stretcher, hooked up to IVs. When he saw her, he tried to rip the IVs out. "Sienna!" They laid her on the stretcher next to him. He reached out, his hand gripping hers so hard it hurt. His face was pale, but he was alive. "You blew up my panic room," he whispered, a strange mix of horror and awe in his voice. "You needed an exit strategy," she mumbled, her head pounding. "Cillian." "Extra crispy," Dante said darkly. "My men arrived 2 minutes after the explosion. The Irishman's crew scattered. We have the city back." He pulled her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, his eyes burning with intensity that made her forget the pain. "I told you," he said softly. "You are dangerous." 6 months later, the charity gala for the Moretti Foundation was the event of the season. The ballroom of the Palmer House Hilton was filled with Chicago's elite politicians, judges, celebrities, and the quiet, dangerous men who pulled their strings. Sienna stood in front of the full-length mirror in the bridal suite, smoothing the fabric of her gown. It was emerald green silk, backless with a slit that went up to her thigh. It was a far cry from the scrub she used to live in. "You look terrifying," Chloe said from the couch, sipping champagne. "In a good way. Like I could save your life or order a hit on you kind of way." Sienna smiled at her reflection. Chloe knew everything now. It was hard to keep secrets when your best friend's face was plastered on the news as the philanthropist doctor who married the city's most elusive bachelor. "Is the necklace too much?" Sienna asked, touching the diamonds at her throat. "It's worth more than my apartment building." "Keep it," Chloe grinned. There was a knock at the door. Lorenzo entered. He was wearing a tuxedo now, though he still looked like he wanted to break someone's neck. "Mrs. Moretti," he nodded respectfully. "The boss is waiting." "The boss is waiting." Sienna took a deep breath. Mrs. Moretti. She still wasn't used to it. They had married 2 months ago in a private ceremony in Lake Como. No press. Just Leo, fully recovered. Chloe, and enough security invade a small country. She walked out of the suite and down the grand staircase. The chatter in the ballroom died down as she descended. Dante was waiting at the bottom of the stairs. He looked devastating in a black tuxedo. The recovery had been long, 2 surgeries and months of physical therapy. But he was stronger than ever. The vulnerability she had seen in the panic room was gone, replaced by the ironclad confidence of the Capo dei Capi. But when he looked at her, the ice in his eyes melted. He took her hand, kissing the inside of her wrist. "You're late," he murmured. "I was busy saving a life," she teased. "Dr. Evans needed a consult on a thoracic case. Always working." He shook his head, though he was smiling. "Are you ready?" "For what?" "To remind them who owns this city." They walked into the crowd together. The sea of people parted for them. For you parted for them. Sienna saw the melee and honor nafti. She saw the chief of police toast them with his glass. She caught sight of a man in the corner, Declan O'Malley's successor. The Irishman himself had been found floating in the Chicago River 3 days after the attack on the penthouse. His replacement looked at Dante with pure fear. Dante squeezed her hand. He knew. She wasn't just the doctor anymore. She wasn't just the girl who accepted a dare. She was the woman who had walked into the fire for him. She knew where the bodies were buried because she had helped stitch up the man who buried them. They reached the center of the room. The band slowed down. "Dance with me," Dante commanded softly. As they swayed to the music, Sienna rested her head against his chest. She could hear his heart beating strong and steady. The heart she had restarted, the heart she had restarted, the heart she held in her hands. "Do you regret it?" he asked suddenly, his voice low in her ear. "Regret what?" "The dare. Walking up to the most serious man in the bar. Losing your normal life." She pulled back to look at him. She looked at the scar on his eyebrow, the dangerous set of his jaw, and the ring on his finger that matched hers. She thought about the adrenaline, the fear, the power. She thought about the way he looked at her like she was the only thing that mattered in a world of chaos. "My normal life was boring," she whispered. "I'd take the devil over the mundane any day." Dante smiled a real, brilliant smile that he saved only for her. "Good," he said, spinning her around as the camera flashes erupted like fireworks. "Because we're just getting started, and that is the story of how a single dare changed the fate of the Chicago underworld. It's a reminder that sometimes the biggest risks yield the biggest rewards, and that love can be found in the darkest of corners, even with a gun to your head." If you enjoyed this roller coaster of romance, danger, and medical improvisation, please destroy that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a story. What would you do if you were dared to kiss a mafia boss? Would you run or would you take the gamble? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.